Joshua Graham is one of the best written characters in gaming history. He has depth, a tragic backstory, and a redemption arc that is perfectly executed. I really found myself fascinated by him in my New Vegas playthroughs and knew I had to make a video on him during the Fallout lore series we are making here on the channel. It's not every day you meet a Mormon missionary turned super lethal assassin. Today, we will be going over the life and lore of Joshua Graham, and if you enjoy this one, then check out the playlist in the description after for even more Fallout lore you can sink your teeth into. Born in the serene and tightly knit community of New Canaan, a Mormon settlement in the remnants of Ogden, Utah, Joshua Graham was raised in a time of peace and spiritual devotion. The values of his faith were deeply ingrained in him from a young age, and he quickly developed a natural talent for languages, which would become one of his most valuable skills. As he matured, Graham took on the roles of missionary and interpreter, using his gifts to communicate with the diverse peoples of the wasteland, bridging gaps between cultures and spreading the teachings of his faith. By 2246, the call to serve his faith on a broader scale beckoned. Graham was tasked with a sacred mission to spread the good word to the far reaches of the wasteland, to bring the light of New Canaan to those who lived in darkness. Fluent in several tribal dialects, Joshua Graham was uniquely suited to this mission. His linguistic prowess made him an ideal candidate when the followers of the apocalypse sought assistance for an expedition into the Grand Canyon. The followers, always in pursuit of knowledge and the betterment of society, aimed to study the local tribes and provide them with aid, and they needed someone who could bridge the language barrier. Graham answered the call, leaving behind the safety of New Canaan to embark on a journey fraught with unknowns. His path took him south, along the Long 15 and Route 89, heading towards the harsh lands of Arizona. Along the way, he met up with two followers, Calhoun and Sallow, who were to be his companions on this expedition. Together, they ventured into the heart of the Grand Canyon, a region that, despite its desolate beauty, was home to numerous tribes, each with its own unique culture and language. In this rugged and unforgiving environment, Graham's skills were invaluable. He served as the primary interpreter between the followers and the tribal peoples, facilitating communication and fostering mutual understanding. His deep respect for the tribe's customs and his ability to speak their languages opened doors that might otherwise have remained closed, allowing the followers to conduct their work with greater effectiveness. The expedition was not merely about survival. It was about learning, connecting, and sharing knowledge across cultural divides. As he spent time with the tribes, Graham's understanding of their ways deepened, and so did his sense of purpose. He was no longer just a missionary from New Canaan. He was becoming something more, a bridge between worlds, a conduit for understanding in a land torn by conflict and strife. His work with the followers of the apocalypse was not just about translating words. It was about translating ideas, values, and hopes for a better future. This mission to the Grand Canyon marked a pivotal chapter in Joshua Graham's life. It was a journey that would set him on a path filled with challenges, transformations, and trials far beyond what he could have imagined when he first left New Canaan. The knowledge he gained, the relationships he built, and the experiences he endured in those early days would shape the man he would become. A man whose name would echo through the wasteland, remembered not only for his deeds, but also for the complex legacy he would leave behind. Around 2247, the journey of Joshua Graham and the followers of the apocalypse led them to their first stop in the Grand Canyon, the territory of the Blackfoot tribe. Initially, the expedition was met with what seemed like hospitality, and Joshua's role as an interpreter proved invaluable. His linguistic skills allowed the group to communicate with the tribe, fostering a sense of mutual understanding. However, this peaceful exchange was short-lived. Something went wrong, perhaps a slight error in translation on Joshua's part, or perhaps an entirely unrelated misunderstanding, and the Blackfoot tribe's demeanor shifted from welcoming to hostile. In an instant, the expedition found themselves held captive, their lives hanging in the balance as the tribe demanded ransom for their release. While in captivity, Joshua and his companions, including the followers Calhoun and Sallow, learned more about the Blackfoots and the dire situation they faced. The Blackfoots were embroiled in a brutal war with 7 other tribes in the Grand Canyon, and they were losing badly. Their desperation was palpable. They were a tribe on the brink of destruction, their warriors outmatched and their resources dwindling. Against Calhoun's objections, Sallow saw an opportunity in their plight, a chance to take control of the situation and reshape the destiny of the Blackfoots. Sallow, a man with a deep knowledge of history and warfare, took charge, convincing the Blackfoots that under his leadership, they could turn the tide of the war. He began to teach the tribe the tenets of organized warfare, how to care for their weapons, how to craft explosives, and the tactics needed to become a disciplined fighting force. Joshua Graham, still serving as the expedition's interpreter, found himself in a new and unexpected role. No longer just a translator of words, he became the crucial link in Salo's plan, the bridge between Salo's strategic mind and the Blackfoot warriors who would carry out the plan. Graham's role was indispensable. He communicated Salo's instructions with precision, ensuring that the tribe understood the complex tactics being taught to them. Under their guidance, the disorganized Blackfoot tribe began to transform. They learned how to maintain their weapons, how to manufacture new ones, and how to operate as a cohesive military unit. Graham, once a peaceful missionary, was now instrumental in turning a desperate tribe into a capable and deadly fighting force. The tribe began to train in small unit tactics, honing their skills in combat, and slowly, the tide of war began to turn in their favor. The transformation of the Blackfoot tribe was swift and brutal. The teachings of Salo, translated and imparted by Graham, reshaped the tribe's identity, turning them into warriors who could stand against their enemies. The once disparate and disorganized Blackfoots became a unified force, capable of defending themselves and pushing back against the tribes that had once threatened to destroy them. For Joshua Graham, this experience was a significant departure from his original mission. What began as a journey of peace and learning had taken a dark and violent turn. He was no longer just spreading the word of New Canaan or facilitating communication between cultures. He was now a key figure in a military campaign, his linguistic skills being used to orchestrate war instead of peace. This transformation would leave a lasting mark on Graham, setting him on a path that would eventually lead to even greater and more tragic events in the years to come. With Salo's teachings and Joshua Graham's skills, the Blackfoot tribe transformed from a ragtag group on the brink of defeat into a formidable fighting force. Under their guidance, the Blackfoots prevailed over the other tribes in the Grand Canyon, and in their victory, they hailed Salo as their leader. This triumph marked the beginning of a dark new era in the wasteland, as Salo, now known as Caesar, would go on to forge the most feared empire in the post-apocalyptic world, Caesar's Legion. Joshua Graham, who had once been a peaceful missionary and interpreter, was now at the forefront of this rising power. Elevated to the position of field commander, he trained the forces of the fledgling legion and led them into battle. His leadership soon extended beyond mere training. He was now commanding retaliatory raids and terrorizing local tribes, enforcing Caesar's will with ruthless efficiency. When Salo cast off his old identity and crowned himself Caesar, Graham became his first legate, the infamous Malpai legate. For 30 years, Graham served as Caesar's right hand, helping to conquer the tribes that inhabited the former American Southwest. Together, they took over vast territories, including large swaths of what had once been Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. With each new tribe assimilated into the Legion, their power grew, although Graham admitted that he was neither a brilliant strategist nor tactically flexible. His reputation for brutality and menace became legendary. Under Caesar's banner, Graham committed atrocities that made him feared by both friend and foe alike. His unpredictable and destructive nature made him a dangerous force on the battlefield, and he became known for being nearly impossible to kill, surviving multiple assassination attempts by the new California Republic's first recon sharpshooters and rangers. However, all things must come to an end, and for the Malpai's legate, that end came at the First Battle of Hoover Dam. Around 2277, Caesar's obsession with uniting the wasteland under the Legion's banner reached its peak when he learned of the Hoover Dam in Nevada and the flag being flown over it, the two-headed bear of the NCR. Confident in his army's strength and his legate's prowess, Caesar ordered his united force of 68 tribes to attack the dam, directly clashing with the NCR army forces. As the seemingly invincible Malpai's legate led the legionnaires into battle, Caesar believed victory was assured. However, Graham underestimated the enemy and overestimated his own capabilities as a commander. He treated the battle against the NCR as if it were just another conquest of the eastern tribes, deploying his forces in the usual Legion fashion. Unfortunately for Graham, the NCR Rangers Chief Hanlon had anticipated this move and devised a plan to exploit the Legion's predictability. As General Lee Oliver's soldiers held the Legion's front line at bay, Rangers and 1st Recon sharpshooters targeted the veteran Legion commanders, creating chaos within the Legion's ranks. when Graham ordered his elite forces to break through the NCR's defensive line, the NCR forces executed a tactical retreat into Boulder City, luring the Legion into a carefully laid trap. The Legionnaires who followed were met with a devastating surprise. The buildings in Boulder City had been packed with explosives. When the NCR triggered the explosives, the buildings acted as giant fragmentation bombs, killing and maiming most of the Legionnaires who had entered the city and leaving the survivors in shock. The NCR forces then launched a counterattack, decimating the Legion's troops still on the western side of the Colorado River and forcing the Malpais legate to retreat from Hoover Dam in disgrace. Simultaneous flanking attacks on Camp Gulf and other NCR military locations in the Mojave were similarly repelled, further sealing Graham's failure. Returning to Caesar after the catastrophic defeat, Graham faced the full wrath of his leader. Caesar, unwilling to tolerate failure at any level, decided to make an example of Graham to ensure that such a defeat would never happen again. The Son of Mars brought Graham back to the Grand Canyon, where he ordered his Praetorian guards to carry out a brutal punishment. They covered Graham in pitch, set him on fire, and threw him off the edge of the canyon to be left for dead at the bottom. Thus ended the reign of the Malpais legate, a man who had once been a peaceful missionary but had become one of the most feared figures in the wasteland. His fall from grace was as dramatic as his rise to power, a cautionary tale of how the pursuit of power and the embrace of brutality can lead to ruin and disgrace. Yet, even in his fiery demise, Graham's story was far from over, for he would rise again, reborn from the ashes of his past as the Burned Man, a figure of legend and fear, wandering the wasteland with a new purpose. Despite the lethal nature of the punishment inflicted upon him, Joshua Graham's legendary resilience allowed him to survive his horrific ordeal. After being set ablaze and thrown from the edge of the Grand Canyon, Graham awoke the next day, burned, broken, but miraculously alive. His charred body was in agony, but with a fierce determination, he realized there was only one place left for him to go: home, back to New Canaan. The journey ahead was daunting, but it was his only option. Crawling out of the northern edge of the Grand Canyon, Graham began the grueling trek back to New Canaan, a journey that would take over 3 months and span 400 miles. Every step was a battle against the excruciating pain that racked his body. In his desperation to dull the constant torment of his burns, Graham discovered a cruel irony. He was immune to the effects of wasteland drugs, both beneficial and harmful. This immunity left him with no relief from the pain, forcing him to endure the agony with only his faith and willpower to sustain him. Each day, Graham faced the grueling task of changing the bandages that covered his charred skin, a process that required him to expose his flesh to the air. Every time he did so, it felt like being burned alive all over again, a constant reminder of the punishment that had been meant to end his life. Yet, despite the unbearable pain, Graham pressed on, driven by a renewed sense of purpose and a belief that he had been spared for a reason. When Graham finally reached New Canaan, he was a man utterly transformed by his ordeal. The 30 years he had spent as the Malpais legate, committing atrocities in the name of Caesar, had left deep scars on his soul, but his survival had rekindled his faith. To his surprise, the New Canaanites welcomed him back with open arms, much like the prodigal son in the biblical parable. Despite the horrors he had perpetrated, his family and community saw him not as a monster, but as one of their own, returned to the fold after years of wandering. In Graham's eyes, his survival was nothing short of a second baptism, a rebirth that stripped away his pride and vanity. The flames that had burned his flesh had also cleansed his spirit, renewing his commitment to his faith and giving him a new sense of purpose. The 30 years of separation, the atrocities, and the shame he had carried were all forgiven by his people, who saw only the man they had known before the Legion had taken him away. While Graham sought redemption and a return to his faith, the terror he had inspired as the Malpais legate did not fade so easily. The story of his fiery fall into the Grand Canyon and his miraculous survival spread through the wasteland, evolving into the legend of the Burned Man. Among the wild tribes and even within Caesar's legion, tales of the Burned Man began to circulate, stories of a fearsome figure stalking the wastelands, a ghostly avenger born of fire and wrath. When these stories reached Caesar's ears, he realized that his attempt to erase Graham from existence had failed. In response, Caesar forbade his legionaries from speaking Joshua Graham's true name, enforcing a practice known as damnatio memoriae, erasing all memory of a person's existence. However, this attempt to erase Graham from history only served to enhance the myth of the Burned Man. turning him into a figure of even greater menace and mystery. Determined to complete Graham's destruction, Caesar issued a kill order to his frumentarii, his network of spies and assassins. Wherever Graham might be, Caesar demanded that they find and eliminate him, seeking to end the threat he perceived in his former legate. Despite this relentless pursuit, Graham remained a step ahead, surviving numerous assassination attempts by Legion operatives sent to finish what the flames had started. For his part, Graham chose to forgive Caesar, adhering to his religious belief in hating the sin but loving the sinner. He bore no personal grudge against the man who had ordered his execution, understanding that Caesar's actions were driven by the same ambition and ruthlessness that had once guided his own hand. However, Graham was not naive. He was acutely aware of the danger that still pursued him, a danger that came in the form of the countless frumentarii and Legion assassins who sought his life. In the end, Joshua Graham's story is one of survival, redemption, and the enduring power of faith. Once a feared and brutal legate, he emerged from the flames as a man reborn, determined to atone for his past and to live out the rest of his days in service to his faith and his people. Yet, the shadow of his former life continues to haunt him, as the legend of the burned man grows ever larger, a testament to the indomitable will of a man who refused to be. By 2281, the blood-stained past of Joshua Graham, the former Malpais legate, finally caught up with him in a way he could not ignore. The Whitelegs, a brutal tribe whipped into a frenzy and armed by Ulysses under Caesar's orders, launched a devastating attack on New Canaan. Their mission was clear: to destroy Graham's family tribe and Graham himself in a bid to earn Caesar's favor and secure their place within the Legion. Tragically, the attack came while Joshua and most of the capable Canaanites were away from the city. The Whitelegs descended upon New Canaan with savage ferocity, slaughtering most of the Mormon tribe. The few who survived were forced to scatter into the wilderness, their lives shattered and their community destroyed. The majority of the survivors fled to the only sanctuary they could find, Zion Canyon. It was a place of refuge, but it was also a place of impending conflict as the Whitelegs pursued them relentlessly, determined to finish what they had started. In the face of this threat, Joshua Graham could not stand idly by. He assumed the role of acting war chief among the Dead Horses, a tribe he had once interacted with during his time with the Legion. Alongside him was Daniel, another missionary and one of the few survivors from New Canaan. While Graham took charge of the Dead Horses, Daniel allied himself with the Sorrows, another tribe that called Zion Canyon home. As the Whitelegs closed in, Zion became a battleground, but the conflict within Zion was not only between the tribes, it also raged within the hearts of its defenders. Joshua Graham and Daniel, though both committed to protecting the people of Zion, found themselves at odds over how to confront the enemy. Daniel, true to his missionary roots, advocated for a peaceful, delaying action. He believed that the best course was to safely evacuate the Sorrows and Dead Horses from Zion, leading them away from the Whitelegs and losing them in the vastness of the wilderness. Graham, however, could not accept this plan. The attack on New Canaan had reignited the fires of his past, the impulse for vengeance burning hotter than ever. He saw the Whitelegs as more than just a threat. They were a scourge that needed to be eradicated, a manifestation of evil that deserved nothing less than total annihilation. To Graham, bringing God's justice to those who had committed such senseless atrocities was not just necessary, it was his duty. The blood of his enemies would be spilled in Zion, a natural temple and a monument to the glory of his God, and in doing so, Graham believed he could atone for the sins of his past. The conflict within Graham was as intense as the one between the tribes. He was torn between his desire for true repentance and the burning need for vengeance. The atrocities he had committed in the name of Caesar weighed heavily on his soul, and now, faced with the destruction of his people, he saw an opportunity to make things right through bloodshed. To him, spilling the blood of the Whitelegs in the sacred grounds of Zion was fitting penance for the horrors he had inflicted during his time as the Malpais legate. It was in this state of internal and external conflict that Joshua Graham was met by the courier who had come to Zion with the Happy Trails Caravan Company in 2281. The courier's arrival would bring new dimensions to the struggle in Zion as they found themselves at the crossroads of two conflicting visions for the future. On one side stood Daniel, who sought peace and salvation through retreat. On the other, Joshua Graham, who sought redemption through the sword, in the hope that the eradication of the Whitelegs would cleanse his soul. The battle for Zion was not just a battle for survival, it was a battle for the soul of Joshua Graham. a man haunted by his past, desperate for forgiveness, and yet driven by an unyielding need to exact justice on those who had wronged him and his people. The decisions made in Zion would echo far beyond the canyon's walls, shaping the fate of the tribes and the legacy of the man once known as the Malpais Legate, now reborn as the Burned Man, seeking redemption in a world that had given him nothing but reasons to seek revenge. That is the story of Joshua Graham, the man who really is one of the best written characters of all of Fallout. If you enjoyed this video, then please be sure to press the like button and let us know in the comment section what you enjoyed. If you like Fallout lore videos, then like I said, I put our Fallout lore playlist in the description down below, and you should go give it a watch since there are a lot of great videos in there. Thank you all so much for watching.